Please be seated. Good morning. Great to be back in Pinellas County. We've done something in Seminole High School before, so it's great to be back again. And this is kind of a unique announcement that we'll have here today, particularly for folks here. So I want to thank everybody for coming. So I think as many people know who follow some of the stuff that goes on, we had a Florida Supreme Court justice that recently retired to take a position at the University of Florida, and so that created a vacancy. There's a process in Florida where they do judicial nominating commissions and then produce a list of names for the governor. And my job is to basically pick a name off that list, and then that's somebody that'll be on the Florida Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court in Florida is appointed by the governor. Every 6 years you have these retention elections. I think they've all been retained throughout history, although people rule poorly, maybe that'll change, but basically it's pretty much until you're 75 now is how it goes. So it's a really important thing for the state of Florida. This was something that we put a lot of emphasis on when I first ran for governor, because we had a court that would get outside the law, outside the Constitution, and was really acting as a super legislature, a council of revision almost, and that was really distorting the constitutional processes here in the state of Florida. When I became governor, 3 of those justices had mandatory retirement. So my first month as governor, we appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court in Florida. 2 of those were later put on the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals by President Trump during his first administration. Then I backfilled both of those, and then we were able to also appoint 2 additional justices over the years. And then now so this will be of the 7 justices on the court, 6 of those after today will have been appointed by yours truly. And so that's pretty good. Sometimes governors serve a long time. They don't get any appointments. It's just kind of the way it is. And courts have an important role in our constitutional system. I mean, it's a limited role when it comes to what they're doing as a matter of constitutional or statutory law. I mean, they don't have the ability to go out and just choose that they want to all of a sudden rule on some particular issue. As Hamilton said in the Federalist paper, they have neither force nor will, but merely judgment. The legislature, the people you elect, they're up there now. They can come up with all sorts of ideas and try to pass laws, and that's their job. And then my role as the executive is to, on the one hand, lead and put out a vision and bring people to that, but then also to restrain maybe the legislature if they pass legislation that's not in the interest. And so you veto. I also veto things out of budget. So there's a whole way. There's a yin and a yang with it. But courts, they decide cases. So these cases come up, and you got to render a judgment, and you have to be willing to apply the law as it's written, and apply the Constitution as it's properly understood. You don't have license to change the Constitution or to change statutes because you don't like them. That's exercising will, not merely judgment. And so we've seen that over many years, and I think pretty much anybody who believes in that traditional understanding of the role of the courts would say that the appointees I've had have improved the court, improve their product, and certainly the predictability, and you don't have these things happening like we did in the past. And so that's really, really good. But it's interesting. And we talk about this with U.S. Supreme Court gets obviously a lot of attention when those vacancies come up, and the court's been involved in a lot of issues that perhaps it should never have gotten into over many, many decades. But it becomes more of a flashpoint. But it's interesting. Article 3 of the federal Constitution says, your job is to decide cases and controversies. It doesn't even say judicial review. It's just, you decide a case. You got to decide, does the Constitution conflict with the statute? If so, you got to prefer the Constitution. So you have that. But that's really it. It's interesting. The Florida Supreme Court, it's the same posture, I think, on a lot of cases, but they also have a lot of authority to regulate the legal profession, to regulate the bar, to even have the set out the role that you would have for some of this stuff. And that's not necessarily as passive, right? Because you go out and you're charged with doing some of these things. And I think that there's room, to be really, really bold as it goes there. For example, Texas Supreme Court just recently nuked basically any involvement in the American Bar Association for accrediting the law schools in Texas. And the reason was simple. I mean, the ABA is a very, very partisan activist organization. And you know what? You have a right to be that, but you should not then be the arbiter of legal education and all these other things. And so Supreme Court of Texas said that's not the way we're going to do accreditation. It's going to go through the court's accreditation. And that was a very valid thing to do given the circumstances. So there's actually a lot of ability, I think, to make some really positive changes within that somewhat narrow window that Florida's Constitution has given to the Florida Supreme Court, probably in a way that the U.S. Constitution, does not give to the U.S. Supreme Court. So I think it's an important thing to be able to do. You have a record you look at interview, all these different things, and ultimately it's like someone could be on the court for 20, 30 years. And so there's certain issues we know may be percolating now, and you obviously want to see that people have a good frame of mind on that. But who knows what will come down the pike in 15 years. And really the only way you can be confident that you're going to get good decisions is, to have somebody that's got a really solid foundation, really understands the law, the Constitution, is dedicated to the craft of applying the law and not legislating from the bench. So these are things that are all really, really important. And so we had a lot of great candidates for this particular appointment, but I'm here today to announce that I am going to be signing the appointment to put Judge Adam Tannenbaum to be the next Supreme Court Justice in Florida. Judge Tannenbaum is currently an appeals judge in the 1st District Court of Appeals. Now, why did we come to Seminole High School to do this? Well, he graduated first in his class from Seminole High School back when he was a student, having grown up in this area, and his parents still live very close by right here in Pinellas County. So then he's #1 at Seminole High School. Then he goes to graduate #1 again at the University of Florida. So he's with student government and into Florida Blue Key and UF Hall of Fame now. He received his law degree from Georgetown University Law Center. He did not let that pollute his frame of mind, I'm happy to say, because otherwise he wouldn't be getting this nomination. And so he went through that, done. And then he's had a really distinguished legal career, and he's done a variety of things, not just as a judge, but also working in the different branches of government. And I think he's done very well as a judge. He's written a lot of very important opinions, clearly has a very coherent view of the law. But I will tell you this, I was talking to some of my guys after I interviewed the judge, and it's like we've got 23+ million people, in the state of Florida. And I would guarantee you, you will not find 10 people out of that 23 million that knows more about Florida government, not just law and Supreme Court and courts, but the agencies, the legislative branch, all that, than Judge Tannenbaum. I mean, he knows this stuff very, very well, and I think he's bringing, I was thinking he probably knows more. I've been running the executive branch. He may know more than, he knows how these things work. He knows the pressure points. And I think it's very valuable knowledge to be able to do it. So he's had to think deeply about what's the purpose of the Constitution of the state and these institutions. Now, and ultimately, it's to preserve a free society, to give people opportunities to be able to make the most of their God-given talents, to make sure we maintain order and public safety, and all the really core things is what we're driving for. And so I think he brings a really, really strong background for that. And and I think he's going to do a really, really good job on the Florida Supreme Court. You know, we gave a little talk in Tallahassee yesterday for the state of the state, and, you know, we listed off all the things, you know, 7 years ago to now, all the things that we've achieved, and it's really, really great, and all that, and on an individual basis, yeah, you know, lower taxes, yes, I know we've paid down all this debt that the states had, all these great things. But in the larger context, it's okay, we're on America's 250th anniversary coming up on July 4th, 2026. And, you know, the founders were not just worried about the taxes or that representation or not having a monarchy. Those were important, but the larger question was, you know, could you have self-government actually succeed? Because you know what, it hadn't ever succeeded, you know, in a long-term fashion anywhere else in the history of humanity. And so they really believe that it was the United States that would answer these questions about, can you have a society based on the idea that our rights are naturally granted by God, not by the government? Rule of law rather than the rule of men? Can a written constitution circumscribe power? All these different things. Ultimately, it was up for debate, and it was something that they were trying to answer. But they knew that whatever they did, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, all great, all very important. Those don't run on autopilot. They require every generation to preserve and cultivate a free society, and that's really what we're trying to do writ large in the state of Florida. And so all these positions have important parts to them. Certainly having a court that's dedicated, you know, to the Constitution is very important. And, you know, one thing, and I'm going to let the judge come up here and talk in 1 second. You know, you got to be smart. You got to understand how to interpret the law and the Constitution, but you also have you need to have the courage to be able to apply that in circumstances where it might not be easy. You know, you don't really need constitutional protections if they're popular, right? Because if it's popular, then it's likely not going to be something that a legislature would infringe on, or a local government would infringe on. You know, the time where you need a court to be willing to stand up is when it may not be as popular to do so. There may be times where you have to render decisions that you know is going to lead to criticism from media, and you got to be willing to run into that, and you can't shirk your responsibilities because you're worried that they may say bad things about you. So having that courage and having the warrior spirit that you're going to do what's right, regardless of the blowback or regardless of the fallout, you know, that's something that's an intangible that you necessarily couldn't see on somebody's resume. But I'll tell you, I think Judge Tannenbaum has shown that in his time as an appellate judge. And so the court he sits on gets most of the appeals involving state government, certainly some major issues that have come down the pike over the years, and you know, he's been right on every time he's rendered a ruling. So I think he obviously has the intellect. I mean, if you're first in your class in Seminole High and first in your class at UF, you know, that's obviously very strong, and he's got a great track record there. Very good judge, very good opinions, and you know, look, if you don't have a track record, you may be good, but you just don't know, right? If someone has a track record of doing good, chances are they're going to continue that going forward. So I think he has it, but I also think he has the intangibles of being somebody that really is going to fight for what's right, fight for the Constitution, fight for the people, even when it's not easy. I think he's going to rule without fear or favor. So that's what it's all about. Okay, time to bring the judge up. Former valedictorian, Seminole High School judge, now Justice Adam Tannenbaum. Come on up.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. Please let me begin with gratitude. Thank you, Governor DeSantis, for boldly and relentlessly pursuing your vision for a state judiciary that respects the rule of law and the separation of powers. A judiciary that reflects and respects the values shared by Florida citizens, one that understands its place in the constellation of sovereign powers set out in the Florida Constitution. I wholeheartedly embrace your vision, Governor, and I am honored and humbled that you would entrust me with what likely is your capstone appointment to our state's High Court. And thank you for holding this event at my alma mater, Seminole High School. Go Warhawks. I graduated in 1989, the same year the Stranger Things kids did, as a matter of fact, and the same year that Taylor Swift was born. I gave a valedictorian speech and crossed the stage on a football field not far away from this room about 37 years ago. Never did I expect that I would be back here in this building with the governor of the state of Florida doing this. Seminole is where I grew up, and I'm thrilled to be living here again. It was this school that inspired me to pursue a life in the law. Governor, your announcing this appointment here makes this all that much more meaningful. Indeed, this appointment has deep meaning for me for two other reasons, one that the governor just mentioned. First, I'm faced with the awesome responsibility of filling the seat vacated by Charles Kennedy, a legal giant, a warrior for the cause, and a true public servant. I hope that I am worthy to the task. Second, I get to serve as the justice from the Tampa Bay area, my home, and I'm proud of that as well. Next, thank you to my parents, Jack and Laura, who are here today. My dad just celebrated his 80th birthday, and my mom is just a couple years behind him. In addition to the love, nourishment, and support that they provided me over the years, they gave me something just as valuable. And I direct this also to the students in the back. Room for me to be who I was and am. I rarely did things the way everyone else did them. Even as a kid, I was constantly challenging the why behind accepted practices and seemingly settled assumptions. I know now, as a parent, that this could prove exhausting for a parent. Yet my mom and dad gave me the space and patience I needed to ponder and figure things out in my own way, ugly and chaotic as it may have seemed to them. While I never can fully repay you, Mom and Dad, now that I am home, I hope I can begin by returning to you the care and support you have given to me my entire life. I want to take a moment and acknowledge my grandparents, all deceased. By the way, this is another public speech I've given where I break up, so I have a pattern. I want to acknowledge my grandparents, all deceased, Sadie and Adolph Silver, and William and Adeline Tannenbaum. I was blessed to spend many childhood years around all four of my grandparents. Memories of them continue to be a blessing to me. Thank you to my wife, Whitney, who could not be here because of other obligations. She has supported me from behind the scenes over the course of 22 years of marriage tomorrow. Her preference favors a more private life, I know this, yet because she recognizes how important this work is and understands my passion for it, she consistently has put her preferences aside and her career on hold to care for our 3 children so I could pursue my dreams. Whitney, I love you, and early happy anniversary. I'm also grateful for the 3 intelligent and highly independent children we have raised together. I have one at New College of Florida, one at UCF, and a freshman in high school. They have brought us challenges, of course, as all children do, but also great love and joy. Parenting children is an unparalleled blessing. I am so proud of each of them for who they are and what they continue to accomplish. Next, let me acknowledge the fact that I did not make the journey to this point alone. I am humbled by the amount of time and effort spent on my behalf by all those friends, colleagues, and even just acquaintances, too many to name here, who so believed in me that they would expend such effort praying for me, advocating vigorously on my behalf, and providing wisdom and good counsel to me through the process. Knowledge of your support strengthens me. I will not let you down. Thank you to the members of the Supreme Court Judicial Nominating Commission who devoted countless hours during the Christmas season to complete the process and provide the governor 6 highly qualified nominees. Thank you also to all those references of mine and the others who took time out of their busy days during the holidays to promptly answer requests for information for the candidates. Now let me say a few words about my judicial philosophy and my vision for the court. As an originalist, I subscribe to the fixation thesis and the constraint principle. The meaning of a text is fixed at the time of its ratification or enactment, and that original meaning does not change over time. Moreover, the acknowledgement of a fixed-in-time meaning serves as a constraint on how a judge can faithfully interpret the text. I share Justice Clarence Thomas's view, echoing Federalist 78's observation that you just heard from the governor, that the judiciary exercises neither force nor will, only judgment. That our goal as judges is always to find the correct original meaning of the law. To instead follow and replicate erroneous interpretations of the past is essentially to make the law, usurping in the process the legislature's and the people's authority. If we as judges profess to apply the law and not make it, then the imperative at all times is to recognize what the law is: the constitutional and statutory text, duly ratified or enacted, the text itself capturing both the meaning those words had for the public at the time it became law, plus their context, the society's shared history, customs, and traditions. Underlying this approach is the concept of judicial humility, not judicial supremacy. We should not be afraid to acknowledge that there is an objective truth extrinsic to us. That truth does not originate within us, and it requires an acknowledgement that what judges say about the law is not the law. I'll say that again for the students. What the judges say about the law is not the law. It is merely evidence of the law. We as judges do not declare the law for the state. We seek to find the objectively true meaning of the law that's been handed to us by either the legislature or the people in the Constitution. And that law then to be applied to a set of facts in a particular case. That is our prime imperative. The centuries of history, custom, and tradition come to us through the Anglo-American legal system as our inheritance, and we constantly must be studying all of that and the context in which the law we are applying was adopted. If in the process we discover through additional evidence that our predecessors have missed the mark, we are duty-bound to say so and seek to correct the deviation. If we come across a demonstrably erroneous interpretation of the text, as Justice Thomas says, we should not follow it. Quote, a demonstrably incorrect judicial decision is tantamount to making the law, which the court does not have the power to do. When faced with this incorrectness, I do not see the conservative judicial approach as requiring timidity or half measures in endeavoring to fix it. Sometimes the circumstances require boldness to restore our jurisprudence to its historical roots. Choosing not to do this is not judicial restraint. Judicial restraint describes how the court should approach the work of the other two branches, with respect for separation of powers and for the limited scope of the judicial power, basically to conclusively adjudicate one dispute at a time by ascertaining and correctly applying the originally fixed meaning of the law. Restraint does not and should not describe the court's approach to correcting demonstrably erroneous lines of decision that only it has the power to correct. In the end, my vision for the court is the same as the governor's, something also echoed by Chief Justice Muniz when he was first appointed, that this court, this Supreme Court, can and should be a national leader in both originalist jurisprudence and judicial administration. I look forward to joining my soon-to-be colleagues in this continued pursuit of excellence. I've already described how we can lead on the jurisprudential side. On the administrative side, as the governor just mentioned, I come to this new position willing to look at issues from a fresh perspective and unafraid to challenge accepted, but perhaps wrong or inefficient practices. The court should continue to exercise its constitutional authority to look at the different administrative components that the court supervises and make any necessary changes to ensure those components are efficiently pursuing the court's established values and vision. Steps already have been taken on this front by my soon-to-be colleagues, and I look forward to joining them in the ongoing endeavor. Before I conclude, I once again want to address the students in the back. I know this is a lot to take in a morning at high school, and I've been where you are sitting a long, long time ago. And let me just tell you, I could not have predicted when I was in 1989 that I'd be sitting here right now or standing here right now doing this. I could not have predicted my path in advance. It's taken lots of turns. I've done many things. I'm very fortunate to have been able to do those and get the experience. But I could not have plotted it out, and I didn't in high school. And my message to you is don't feel like you have to plan out your future in detail. Here's my advice to you instead. Because you cannot know the journey God has planned out for you, don't try. Instead, find your passion and pursue it with abandon. Work hard and always do what is good and right. Do this, and you will find yourself exactly where you were meant to be. So let me conclude by again thanking the governor for coming down here to Seminole in Pinellas County, Florida, and for putting his trust in me. I pledge to stay true to the vigorous, mission-based jurisprudential approach I have taken for the past 6 years as a District Court of Appeal judge. And I pledge to work tirelessly to pour everything I have into promoting the rule of law, fostering the judiciary's respect for the separation of powers, preserving our current Constitution, and seeing to it, alongside my soon-to-be colleagues, that Florida's judiciary becomes a national model for excellence. Thank you.
All right. Well, congratulations to now Justice Adam Tannenbaum. I think you see, he guy's pretty smart to be able to do that. And, you know, was talking about when he was valedictorian here at Seminole High. He never thought, you know, he'd have been a Supreme Court justice. And I thought back, like, you know, when I was a senior in high school, never thought I'd be governor. But I think I would certainly have said the odds would even be lower that a Dunedin Falcon like me would appoint a Seminole Warhawk to the Florida Supreme Court eventually. And Seminole was very good in baseball back then. I'm sure they're probably good now. It's a good area for that. But I think this is it's exciting. So we've now, you know, we have 7 justices, and 6 of those have been appointed, you know, since I've been governor, you know, by me. And I know Adam is going to continue the tradition of being really strong. So congratulations, and thanks again to Seminole High for hosting. You know, the odds of one of our high school's graduates ending up on the Supreme Court of the state is very, very, very small to begin with, and certainly someone that was a valedictorian to do. I mean, I guess it would be a little higher because you're up there, but I mean, it's a unique thing. And I think it's a really special thing. So congratulations to Seminole High for having a part in launching somebody now into the highest rung of the legal profession in the free state of Florida. Okay, do we got any questions back there?
Governor, there's a renewed push for New College to take over USF Sarasota Manatee. There have been some concerns from alumni and former faculty members. Can you respond to those concerns? And has the state looked at other options to help New College grow and expand?
Well, I think what you'll find is the leadership at USF, the board chairman, as well as the leadership at New College do agree that this would be good for New College. That campus was actually not something that USF had originally sought out. It was a political. You had the people in the legislature who wanted to do something there. So I think USF, the sky's the limit. I think they're really got great momentum. But like that momentum is really in the Tampa Bay, right? It's Tampa. And that's what I think that they want to focus on. So I think you're going to see that there's going to be pretty strong agreement on that. Look, when you get down into the Sarasota area, there's just an undercurrent of people that just didn't want New College to change. And so anything that we do to try to continue to make it better, they're just going to say, they're going to say it's bad because, New College, I don't even know how many people even knew about New College. Because I'll tell you, I got elected governor. I had never been asked about it. No one had ever mentioned it, anything. And it was a really, for the taxpayers to be funding something that was basically like a Marxist commune. They didn't have grades. They had very low enrollment and all this stuff. And so, it's just like, I'm a fiduciary. It's like we've got to figure out how are these institutions serving the people of Florida, and I couldn't justify it. And it's very valuable real estate. Some people wanted to close it down. And I was like, okay, well, let's make it something meaningful. So we changed the leadership, new board. We reoriented the mission to classical, liberal arts, really something that eschews kind of the ideological fads that really have I think, polluted higher ed. But certainly, New College was knee deep in all that. And that was a really abrupt change. And, there's people say, oh, well, the enrollment, this. Look, there were students who were planning on going under the old, and then obviously the change, it was different. So some didn't, and then they were able to get more. So now what's happened, and this is the third year. So it's really, so we did it 2023, and so what you now see, the enrollment is now grown. The test scores are now going up for entering class. They're going to end up being able to increase the enrollment pretty significantly. It's a great, and then people say, oh, they're spending so much money per student and all this stuff. Well, no, that's because we're putting in capital improvements. These are not going to be expenses that are fixed going forward. It's the campus was in disrepair because it had been neglected. And so, and there's some of these people that have been with New College a long time, some of the faculty, aren't like, my supporters, or they're probably very liberal, but they're like, you know what? No one has really cared about New College for a long time. So they see the attention and the resources and all this stuff. And so growing with being able to utilize the USF campus, is going to be good. USF's not going to lose money. They're still going to get money like they're getting now. They can just apply that money in Tampa rather than apply it there. So I think it's going to be really good. I know there's a lot of support in the legislature for it, and we got to talk to a couple more people. But I think this is going to be really exciting. And I think about there's a lot of parents that have been very concerned about what are they getting themselves into if they send their kid to some of these universities around the country. You've seen Columbia and these places, and you don't want to send and then have the university work against everything you did for 18 years, right? So I think parents are very sensitive about where they're sending. So a place like New College, where you're like really engaging in like the great books, the Western canon, understanding the foundations of our country. They have these great debate series, and they bring in people from different perspectives, and they have these debates. This is, I think, what a lot of parents want to see. They've recruited a lot of great faculty, so you're going to continue to do that. But I think to myself, if you're a parent and there's only so many places, a lot of people talk about Hillsdale in Michigan, really good. but like, would you rather visit Sarasota in January or Hillsdale, Michigan? And I mean, like, come on. Even this weekend when it's going to get colder, it's still going to be a heck of a lot warmer down here than it is up there. So the campus is beautiful, great architecture. I mean, you know, it's like some architecture, more modern, just misses the mark. I mean, I think this is more classic architecture. It just looks good. It's a place you kind of want to be. And I think it's going to be really, really exciting. So we've been supportive of it. I think that what they've been able to accomplish such a short period of time. You know, I mean, think about it. You were in the class, and then now they're saying it's something to. It's almost like if you go to the Naval Academy, then they end up shifting to Coast Guard. Well, that's not what you signed up for. So it's like the people that signed up for kind of the old regime, some of them left, and we were supportive of helping them do that because we understood that. But we also knew that if they came in and make changes, you would start to see. And so you have definitely seen that. And so every year they're expanding enrollment. They now have significantly more than they did before the changes were made. And this is really going to help do that. So it's going to be a really great asset, I think, for the Sarasota community, but also a really great asset for the state of Florida. And I think, did you say you have a kid at New College? Yes, sir. What year? Okay, so came in right as we were doing all this stuff. Okay, well, good. Yep.
Is there any update on the state of Florida bringing state charges against Nicholas Maduro?
No update in the sense of that, you know, we don't have an announcement yet. What I would say is the Attorney General, their office is working, and they're working in conjunction with the federal prosecutors too. In Manhattan, you know, who knows? They could also bring a federal case in South Florida as well. I don't know if they're going to do that, but they certainly could do that. And so I think what we would want to do is just make sure that that's being coordinated so that, you know, you're not stepping on anybody's toes or whatnot. But, you know, all I would say is that if I was Maduro, I would rather have a Manhattan jury than a Miami jury. I mean, I think that's pretty much a guarantee. So we'll see. But yes, it's under discussion. They're working on, but they're not going to go into it and just do it to do it. I think they want to have charges that, you know, if something happens in these federal cases, the state would be last in line, no question. You go, but then make sure that there could be accountability. You know, the problem with I think the problem we have with the jury system right now is like our society is very politically divided. And so it's like, you know, you go to a place like Manhattan, it only takes one juror to just say the hell with this, right? You know, maybe they don't like that the president took him or this or that, and so, you know, you're supposed to weed that out in jury selection, but it's not always easy to do. And so really, you know, you can have one person effectively nullify a valid case. We've seen that here in Florida. We actually had to reform the death penalty because we had a unanimous requirement. And so the Parkland killer from 2018, brutal murders, shattered a community, and yet you had a juror that just refused to do death. And it's like, well, you know, is that your agenda or are you doing the public's agenda? And I think it was the juror had an agenda. So you always have to deal with those issues, but I just think as you get, you know, when you have this and people have the political, getting on a jury is a way to kind of do that. It's not easy to snuff all that out entirely. Although, you know, the Supreme Court actually has authority over voir dire and kind of how it's done, I think, has some ability to do some stuff there. So there's definitely some issues.
Governor, in your view, what are the most important issues and cases that the state Supreme Court is going to be taking up?
Well, I mean, I would say that they've done a good job on a lot of the major cases. I think that these things just kind of come down the pike, right? I mean, you know, are you, you know, willing to rule very strongly and definitively, you know, against very well-heeled interests, for example, if you're right on the law? Are you going to defend the Constitution against attempts to manipulate it? These are things that, you know, until you're there and doing it, we don't know how they come out. I would say that by and large, you know, the justices have, you know, have done a good job. Some, I think we have some on there that I would say have batted 1,000. We have others that may not be quite that high, but have been good. They've all been good. And I think I would bet that, I think Judge Justice Tannenbaum will bat 1,000. I really do. I think he's going to be where you need on all these really key things.
Governor, when it comes to the schools of hope, I want to ask about that. Are they fair burdens to put on districts to have them pay for all the charter school expenses?
So here, I think it's important because, this stuff just gets out. I'm like, I see something like, so schools of hope, first of all, you had one charter company that filed like for 150. There's not going to be 150 schools. You're talking about areas, you would not get a school of hope here in Seminole, right? It's like you're talking about really tough areas where they haven't been able to really get success yet. And so you have, and this was driven by one particular charter operator, Success Academy out of New York City. They go into some of these difficult areas, and the New York politicians, fight against them. They've got like 92% for reading and math. In New York City, in these Success Academies, and then the schools nearby are like 40%. So they have a formula that really works, and they're going into areas that really need help and where you haven't been able to kind of dot the I's and cross the T's, where the students are able to really do it. We've had a lot of success, but you do that. So you're talking about a small number of schools around the country, maybe a few in Miami-Dade, a few in Broward, a few in Orlando, some of those areas. You are not going to see them in suburban Florida. That's just not that's not the purpose of it. So just a lot of what's happened is like, all these schools are going to be taken over. No, that's not going to happen. So it's going to be limited. Now, if there's unused space in schools, we think it makes more sense to allow them to use, to do the unused space rather than have to build something which is costly, lease something. So it's really, because they are getting taxpayer money to run these programs, and so it saves money for the taxpayers. Now, in terms of some of the services, I'm open to, if they have janitorial and that's an extra 10% for them to be doing that. I know the legislature is discussing that. I think that's totally fair. But to say that you have this space that nobody's using and they have an opportunity to go in and really focus on the students that a lot of people have written off as somehow they can't succeed because of their circumstance or whatever, that is a great lifeline that they're willing to provide to a lot of students in need. So the space available makes sense. No one's school is going to be taken over, particularly in some of the areas. You hear people from like these like, pretty affluent areas like, I don't want a school of hope here. Well, no, there's not going to be a school of hope there. You do that. So the one concern, though, about, okay, if they're using this, if it's a little more electricity, a little more janitorial, a little more, is that something that they could do? And I know the legislature is working on it, and I think that's very, very reasonable. So it's not going to be burdens, and I think that's the whole reason. The way you want to do it is to simply just efficiently use resources, but not, the expectation is not that then the school district would just have to do anything. Well, then just have the school district do it themselves, right? So it'll be done, I think, rationally. And again, this is something that's very, very targeted at a very discrete set of problems and we've got a lot of choice in Florida. I remember, I went to Dunedin High School because I lived there, right? I lived in the city. That's why we went. That's where you were zoned. Now, they did have in the 90s, you had people would go to St. Pete High for IB. I wasn't interested in driving all the way down there for that, but you had it. And you may have had another magnet or two at the time. I don't think charter schools even existed back then. And then obviously we had private schools, but there was no scholarship for parents. And so that was kind of that thing. Now you have a situation where if you're a parent in Florida, if you're living here, you can go to Seminole High School. You can take the scholarship and go to most of the private schools. Now, not all of them take them, but most of them do. You could do that. You have charter school options. And in some parts of Florida, like Miami-Dade, 70% of the students are going to a school other than the public school that they're zoned for. So some of them are in public school choice in the district. Some of them are in charter, which is also public. Some of them are in private. Some are homeschooling. We have a lot of homeschool families now. So just from a parent's perspective, you really have good options. And that's something that I think has been very beneficial for a lot of people. But even with all of that, you still have some of these places in Florida where we can do better. It's not easy, and I think that what Success Academy's done, this is not just like, oh, they come, because like people pitch me all this stuff. Like, first of all, like, I don't even make decisions. I was like, oh, I've got this great thing that this department. Well, I'm not choosing that. Like, you got to go do a competitive bid and all this stuff. But they still want to brief you on things. So it's like this. Everyone's got these new ideas, right? But a lot of times they don't have a track record. Well, Success Academy has the track record. I mean, they're not being invited in with the Schools of Hope program because we think that they created, a nice presentation and maybe it'll work. No, they've shown that they can work in difficult circumstances, in difficult environments like in New York City. And to have the results be as strong as they have been is really, really incredible. And then the difference is in Florida, we embrace the operators and the scholarships and the homeschoolers. In New York, they do not embrace. I mean, like, they are trying to throw sand in the gears. It's basically the schools are basically run by the school unions, not by the parents or the thing. And that's really, and so they've got a lot of money goes through the system, and it's mostly for the administration of the system and the bureaucracy, and that's what kind of does it. So they defend that very, very fiercely. So to have a Success Academy, that's not something that they've liked, and yet they've been able to succeed. So that just tells me that if they can succeed, what Frank Sinatra's, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Well, in this case, if you can do well there in New York, I mean, you're probably going to be able to do well in Florida. So this is going to be, I think they're going to start, I guess in the fall will be the first one. I think either this fall or next fall. They're working on that. But there is going to be stuff in the legislature that will, some of the concerns, are not unreasonable, but I would say most of the stuff that's been put out there is just not within the realm of what is accurate or what is reasonable. And, there's no, why would you even want to be injecting in, like a Success Academy, in a place where everybody's happy, with the choice options?
And Governor Collins is now in the race, and Renner is right over here in Tampa. Any endorsement, and what are your thoughts on the rollout from the Lieutenant Governor?
Look, I've been focused on, delivering the state of the state, making sure that our priorities are going where it was. There'll be time to do the political stuff. What I would just say is, we have a record of success here in Florida. Obviously, I went through all the metrics and all the achievements. We've got more to do, and we'll definitely run through the tape on that. But if I were one of those guys, I would say, here's how I supported, the success Florida's had, and here's what I'll do to build on it going forward. And I would, articulate things that you want to tackle. So we'll see how that goes. And now that we kind of got on the other hump of launch and session, we did do the special session declaration for the congressional redistricting. I think have a lot of stuff that are a lot of irons in the fire that are fine. We are going to fine tune and work to get the legislature to get a property tax on the ballot, so voters have an opportunity, to vote themselves relief there. There's a lot of costs that people have been burdened with, particularly since we've been in the inflationary period that's really started with COVID, right? And the federal government, the Fed, all the gusher and really the inflation and the devaluation of our currency. So that's been happening for many years now. And it's like, okay, grocery, this, that, all these things. Now, gas is down, which is good. I think a lot of people appreciate that. Some of the other stuff's been more difficult. And I mentioned yesterday, we did an announcement on Monday for Citizens Insurance is doing average 8.4% reductions. So when they do their notices this spring, average is 8.4. Now, some will get more, some will get less, but that's what's going to be biggest reduction in the history of the program. Other companies, because we did the reforms a couple years ago, they're announcing 5, 8, 9% reductions. Even auto insurance is coming in. USAA just announced, I think they announced an 8% reduction. Progressive announced. So as the new policies take hold, you're going to start seeing that, shop around, all that stuff. And those reforms were difficult to fight for. But at the end of the day, those markets are affected by things exterior to state government. In fact, most of what affects them has nothing, it's not in the control of state government, right? The one thing in terms of helping people with affordability that we control through our Constitution, in this case with the ballot initiative, is the tax. And the reality is, as I mentioned yesterday in my speech, we had $32 billion that local governments in Florida took in property tax in 2019. Last year, $56 billion. So that's a massive increase. Why? Because more people have moved here, valuations have gone up, assessments have gone up. Yes, in some instances, millage rates have gone up, but most of it is just because the assessments have changed. And so you can have a situation, you can have like a young family, they want to buy a home in some suburb, and you'll have somebody that's been there 20 years as a homestead. You buy it, your tax basis is way, you could be paying 4 or 5 times as much as that. And so it's created, I think, a lot of distortions. And then the people that are locked into lower, they don't really want to sell because, if you have a home, you're an empty nester, you go buy like a condo or something for cheaper, but the assessment may even still be higher. And then you have all these other issues. So I just think that that's something that's really, really important. And we're going to work hard to get it right. Look, there's things that you got to think about. I want to help Florida residents with their primary residence. That's what I want to help. I don't care if somebody moves from Chicago after this. I don't want to incentivize people to come to claim this, right? So, you should have to have some skin in the game. There's ways we got to structure this so that it's not creating incentive for people to come and to be able to do that. There's also ways, that you can kind of phase this in. So we're working with the legislature at all those different things, but I just think people want to have an opportunity, to get some relief. But don't let anyone tell you, when you go from $32 billion to $56 billion, don't let anyone tell you that if you, in the homestead, is like a third of all property tax revenue that locals get. They get non-homestead residential because all these Airbnbs, right? It's like, tax those and give the homeowner who actually lives in the house, give them the break, commercial, all this other stuff, snowbirds, Canadians own homes, people from, and I'll bet you, I know people that fled Venezuela own homes in South Florida, all that. So we have, we're in a unique situation. We have so many visitors. You absolutely, could do it. But if someone tells you, oh, you can't do anything homestead, you're not going to have money for police, you're not going to have money. Well, then do we have that much more? Are you getting 80% better services than you did in 2019? Well, the revenue's gone up 80%. Of course not. So, there's obviously some room here to do something really, really significant. But you gotta get it right, and we're working on doing that. So that's going to be my primary focus. And then if there's an opportunity that I see for me to weigh in on it, I will just say, I do think that, Florida, we used to always be on pins and needles on Florida elections, right? Because it was always so close. And then, I got in and we started to really see some momentum. And then when I did my second term, we had the biggest victory in Republican history, right? Massive supermajorities, all this other stuff. And then last year, or 2024, you had Florida in the presidential election was not a contested state. They used to spend hundreds of millions of dollars here. I remember when Hillary was running against Trump in 2016, there was no quarter I could watch anything on TV without seeing her commercials. It was unbelievable. Biden spent a fortune here. They didn't spend 1 cent in Florida in 2024 because they basically had recognized, the state had done that. So I think now people just kind of assume, oh, well, Florida is, it's good, whatever. But these things go in cycles, right? And, if you get in and you're not doing, I think what people want, you do see a movement back. And I definitely think there's a big danger of that going forward. It's not on autopilot. We've had to fight really hard to deliver results across the board. So I wouldn't take anything for granted. I would not certainly take, the fact that you got big legislation, all this stuff every 2 years you got to fight for. And ultimately, I think people responded to having results delivered. The minute that people are concerned about other things than that, then you start to give, the other side an opportunity to come back in and maybe make a little bit of a comeback. But that'll be more of something that people within the party are giving that as an opportunity. But I do definitely see that. I mean, there's definitely some cause for concern. So, okay, well, we'll be back here soon, hopefully. But I want to again congratulate Justice Tannenbaum. And, the way it works in Florida, they have the JNC, they give the list, all this. I pick the name off the list, and he's on the court. There's no Senate confirmation. There's no anything like that. So he will sign it, and he will go from an appeals judge to the final, the court of last resort on the Supreme Court. Do you get a pay increase for this? Yes, he gets a pay increase, Not that that's why he wanted to do it, but hey, it's good for the goose, good for the gander. Thanks, everybody.